Alright, so here we have the electronics assembly guide for the RepRap Prusa i3 build guide, although this exact same build guide will work for the i2 version as well. Just to go over what we're going to have, we have our Atmega 2560 board, which is essentially the brain of the RepRap, and it's also what interfaces with the computer. We have our Ramps 1.4 controller board. This is where your power supply, your bed, your end stops, your motors, and your stepper drivers are all going to connect to. Here we have our stepper drivers. This is going to tell the motors how many times to step and when to step. And even though we have 5 motors, we're only going to use 4 stepper drivers because the 2 Z-axis motors are going to use the same driver. So first we'll just go into real quick how to get the stepper drivers on the Ramps board. You'll see here, if you look at your Ramps board in front of you, they'll be labeled X, Y, Z, E0, and E1. We're only going to use E0 because we only have one extruder. X, Y, Z, as you've probably assumed, are for the axis motors. So you'll see there are 6 pins here, 6 here, and these here have what we call jumpers on them, and they control the steps of the drivers. So for these, we're going to use 3 jumpers on the 6 pins so that they are all covered, and they just slide right on. Nothing difficult about them. Alright, so those are all covered now, and the stepper driver is going to just plug right on top of them. Now, you may have to do some testing to make sure the direction of the motors are turning properly. However, we know that the pot on this driver will face away from the power supply connection. And you just push that in until it snaps. Now, your stepper drivers are also going to come with some heat sinks that have some stickers on the back. You just peel them off and stick them right on top the chip there. And then the Ramps board will connect on top of the Arduino using these pins on the bottom and these ports on the top, and you simply push the two together. Now, your motor connections are going to go in these 4 pins along the sides here. And these are basically going to be the polarities, the 2A, 2B, and 1A, 1Bs. So we're going to show you real fast how to test the couple of pairs on the motors. So using a NEMA 17 stepper motor, you're going to have 4 leads. Now, we know our pairs are black and green and red and blue. But in order to test these pairs, because you may not be using the same type of motors, we're going to test them. So you'll notice if we touch the green and then touch the black, our multimeter tells us they're a pair, just as if we touch the red and the blue. But if we touch the green and the blue, silence. So we know those are not a pair. So we know that black and green are 1A and 1B. So, on the Ramps, you'll see on these 4 pins right above them, it's written 2A, 2B, 1B, 1A. And you'll simply plug in your pairs to their respective positions. And there you go. You have your stepper driver for the X-axis, and then the X motor is now plugged in. Although you're going to want to assemble the printer with the motors attached before plugging them in to the controller board. And now we're going to move into the end stops, but first we're going to go over how to solder them. Thank you. Alright, so here we're going to solder the end stops and then show you where they go on the Ramps board. We have our soldering iron and our soldering wire. It's going to act basically as the bonding agent to make sure that the wire sticks securely to the end stop. We've already wrapped our wires around the first and third end stop port, which will be COM and NC. Our red wire here is the COM and the blue wire is the NC. So we're going to melt a little bit of our soldering wire and just sort of spot weld it essentially on to the end stop to secure the wires. And we'll do this and make sure it's all the way around. And we'll make sure to do both of them. A little bit more. Okay, and that's all of that. So we have our end stop. Remember to make sure that you skip the second one and just do the first and third, which are COM and NC. So we're going to flip it around here and do the Molex connecting side, where we are going to strip the wires, crimp the pins on them, and then stick them in the connector. So I've already done one of them, but we'll go over here and we'll strip this wire. Alright, twist it off to make sure that it's going to slide in the connector easily. Then you'll have these little crimping pieces in your set, and these are what are going to snap into the Molex connector. So you should slide it through there until the arms at the bottom of the crimping piece are wrapped around the unexposed wire. Then we're going to bring over our crimping tool and pinch it essentially so that those two arms look like they are hugging the wire. And then we're going to cut off the extra on the end. Alright, then these two pieces, remember red is our COM in this instance, so we are going to stick it in the middle port. Okay. And blue we are going to stick, which is our NC, in the part of the Molex connector. You may not be able to see it, but it has an arrow on it. And we are going to go ahead and stick that blue one, the NC, in the arrow part. Okay, so we have our connector made. Now we're going to bring the ramps over here. And if you can see these parts here, it's written on the board itself, it says end stops. On the top part you'll see an S, a minus, and a plus. We're going to stick our COM, which is in the middle port right now, to the minus section, and the NC to the S. And it's going to snap it on like this in the first port. Now the first port is going to be an axis. You're going to skip the second, go to the third, that'll be another one. Skip the fourth, go to the fifth, and that'll be your third axis. So you want to make sure you put in your end stops in every other port with the COM in the negative and the NC on the S. But you're going to want to connect these to your printer before you plug everything in the ramps board, just as we said with the motors. So that's all for the end stops. Next we'll go over the power supply and the heat bed. Alright, so now we are going to wire the power supply. Provided with most of these power supplies is a regular cable with the 3-prong end that'll go into the back of most power supplies, but for this one we are going to have to cut the cable on the end, just strip it like you'd strip any other wire, and on the inside you're going to have a green, a black, and a red wire. These are going to go into the ground, neutral, and live respectively. As always, black is your neutral, green is your ground, red is your live. And all that's going to do is you're just going to take your power supply, open up this little yellow hatch here, and in ports 7, 8, and 9, unscrew them, slide in the wires, screw them back in. Next, we are going to put in the wires that will power the ramps board. You're going to need 2 white and 2 black 18 gauge. The colors don't really matter, you just need 2 negative and 2 positive. But they are going to be cut probably to about 1/2 meter each. And you'll do exactly what you did with the power cable. These first 3 ports here are all your positives, and the second 3 are all your negatives. Now we're only going to use the first 2 of each one though. So we'll go ahead and put in our first positive underneath here. Tighten that one. Put in our second positive. Tighten that one. And then, as I said, we're going to skip the third one because it's also a positive and go to ports 4, 5, and 6. And there you have it. Your power supply has all the wires it needs going in and out. Next, we are going to bring over the ramps, which the power supply is going to go into the green connectors on the end of the ramps. I don't know if you'll be able to see, on the back they're labeled positive, negative, positive, negative. So you're going to do your white wires, your positives, are going to go in the first and third slot, and your black ones are going to go into the second and fourth slot. And those work pretty much the exact same way as the ones we just did. You're going to use a flathead screwdriver to open up the ports on the bottom. And then swing around, put in the white on that side, and then screw it back in. So we're going to go ahead and do that, and then go over the assembly of the entire ramps board and show you how everything plugs in. Alright, so now we're going to do the heat bed soldering. It's a really simple process. You'll notice the heat bed on 2 sides. One side has the heating element lines are fairly visible. If you flip it over, it's completely smooth. You can't see any markings underneath. And this is your top side. So we're going to be soldering on the bottom, the part that has the lines on it. You'll see on the bottom there's a 1, 2, and 3 spot, and then here you'll see them labeled plus, minus, minus. So for this, we're going to need our heat bed, our soldering iron, our soldering wire, 2 black 18 gauge wires, and 1 white. We're going to use the 2 blacks for negative and the white for a positive. So very simply, we are just going to go ahead and solder these on. These wires are bigger, so they'll take a little bit more than the previous ones to get stuck on there tightly. Now these wires will be moving with the bed, so you want to make sure they're tight on there. We do not want them to come off. Alright, there's one done. Then we'll move on to the next. Negative wire. Might be easier to twist these off, as I'm sure you don't with the other wires. Okay, that one's on there, and we'll move on to the final positive, the white wire on number 1 spot. Lay it down. Stick it on. Easy as that. Now these are going to go into your ramps board, and then next we're going to show you how to wire the power supply and then assemble all the electronics together. Alright, we just soldered the 2 negatives and 1 positive wire on the back of the heat bed. Now we're going to attach the thermistor. This is going to relay back to the computer what the bed temperature is, and this will help you regulate it and adjust it during your prints. So for this part, we're going to need our heat bed, a little bit of Kapton tape, the thermistor, and some 22 gauge wire. Now, first we are going to go ahead and split our 22 gauge wire and solder it to both ends of the thermistor. And this will allow it to read from both sides. Then we're going to take the other end of the 2 wires, crimp it with our DuPont crimpers, and put it in a 2-pin wire connector. And basically this, you can actually tape it anywhere you want on the back of the heat bed. It's more advisable to do it closer to the center, since that's where most of your prints are going to be centrally located. But all you have to do is peel off your Kapton tape, and tape this wherever you see fit. And there we are. Now we are ready to mount the heat bed and move on. Alright, now we have our pretty much almost assembled Prusa i3. We're going to go ahead and attach the bed to it now. Honestly, we could have done this earlier when we made the Y-axis, but you know, it's neither here nor there. You can do it either way. So we're going to go ahead and put the bed on. Throw the wires in the back for now. Now we want to make sure we have the smooth end without the heating element lines. Smooth end on top. This is going to be where the glass will set, and basically will be your printed surface. So the holes on the 4 corners of the bed should match up with the 4 holes on the bed frame. We're going to take our platform spring, very small, a M3 20mm bolt, and a nut and a washer. And basically we're going to go ahead and fit this through there, then fit the spring on and stick it through the bed mount. On the bottom of that, we are going to throw on a washer and a nut. And it is as simple as that. I'm going to make sure the washer doesn't fall off while we're trying to screw it in here. And this is probably the part where it was easier to do when we put it on the Y-axis. But, so get that threaded on whenever it chooses to do so. And there we are. We're going to repeat that on all 4 sides. Tighten them accordingly. We're going to have to level them, which will be very important before we start printing. But that'll also go along with the Z-axis leveling as well. So we're going to go ahead and get all those screwed on now and plug in the electronics. Alright, so now after we've got the bed on there, we're going to revisit the end stops. You'll see we have them here attached to the plastic end stop holders with the M2 nuts and bolts. We're going to go ahead and just clip these on the rods. Now you're going to have to test these positions later on to make sure that they stop at the correct time. But basically the idea for the X is that the trigger will hit it there and stop it. We're going to do the Z over here on this side. Now we're putting them on this side because the front left of your printer is its home. So the end stop should be on the home side. And as I said, you're going to have to adjust these positions later to make sure that they tell the printer when to stop in the correct spot. The last one, the Y, is going to go in the back behind the motor on one of the lower threaded rods. Basically, you just want the Y bed carriage to just tap it on the way back so it doesn't go back too far. But yep, and then you will use your M3 nuts. You'll notice on the end stop holders, there's a groove that you can put a nut in and then put your M3 through. Now I'll tighten it on the bar. But now we're going to plug in all the electronics.